Good evening and welcome to the Kuhn Academy for this installment of AP Government, where we are building responsible voters one video at a time. All right, this is Governor John Kasich from the great state of Ohio. You might know me from running for president. And
I'm Kate Brown, the governor of Oregon.
And we're here today to talk to you about fiscal federalism and what are known as grants. All right, so take a look at this cartoon, and you can kind of see here from the title that block grants are somewhat controversial. So as we learn about these, we're going to revisit this cartoon at the end, and we want to hear your take on why they are controversial and the interpretation of this cartoon. All right, here we go.
Again, thank you for inviting me into your classrooms. I'm here from Oregon. I wanted to talk about, first of all, fiscal federalism. I know that you're aware of federalism. I understand the students, you've been working on this. Fiscal federalism then involves taxing and spending. The government, the federal government, is in charge of taxing and spending, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video, the different areas of grants related to federal spending.
And fiscal would be a great word to see on the word wall in your class tomorrow, hint, hint. Okay, so fiscal federalism is kind of enforced through something called grants and aid. You're going to see this term a lot on the AP exam, and basically a grant and aid is just simply a grant. It is money that comes from the government that is some form of financial assistance. Some of you might be getting grants for college. That's financial assistance from the government to pay for that, okay? And those of you history buffs might remember the Morrill Land Grant Act, which was the first federal grant of money given to states for agricultural colleges and things like that. So a grant and aid is just a plain old grant. We're going to learn about the different types of grants here, starting on the next slide with Ms. Brown.
Great, and I'd like to talk about categorical grants. As a governor, and I think most governors would agree with me, but I don't like categorical grants. They're very specific. It's the federal government making quite a bit of recommendations. So categorical grants are grants that do have a very specific purpose. For example, school lunch programs. The federal government may give money to a state, but it's for a very specific purpose. You have to use this federal money to provide lunches to people below a certain income level. There's no discretion, and a lot of times it does require matching funds. The state government has to match the funds provided by the federal government. So it is a way of the federal government giving states money, but with very, very many strings attached and requirements.
Okay, and Medicaid, you saw that last slide was an example of a categorical grant, which we'll see on that last slide. Okay, so block grants is another type of grant that a Republican governor such as myself, John Kasich, would prefer. As a Republican, I would like this because it gives more power to the states, but also in a sense that it gives more power to the states, but also in a sense that governors have more discretion with how to use the money. A block grant can be used for a variety of purposes within a broad category. So if you get an education grant, you can spend it on whatever you want as long as it's pertaining to education. Okay, where a categorical grant that says buy new computers has to be spent on computers. Okay, so the governors are going to prefer the blocks because there's less strings attached and they have more freedom with how to spend the money. Okay, and we've seen a transition of more and more of these block grants replacing categorical grants over the years. Okay, here's Ms. Brown.
Over winter break, I had some students from Mundelein, and they were students, I understand, visiting our state from Mrs. Bonadies' and Mr. Kuhn's class, and they shared this analogy that they had heard from their teachers. A block grant can be considered, you can look at it as a big block of cheese. Here's a big hunk of cheese, take it and do what you will with it. You can cut it up and divvy it out however you'd like. Categorical grants are more like craft singles. They're pre-done, they're pre-packaged, and the federal government is telling you exactly how to use them and how much to provide for them.
And as a Packer fan, we love cheese, as we know.
Mandates. Let me talk about mandates. They're requirements which are imposed by the national government on the state government. So a mandate is something that is in fact required. The federal government is requiring the states to do something. Sometimes the federal government does not provide money, but it does provide the mandate. For example, the American with Disabilities Act was what's known as an unfunded mandate. The federal government requires all states in their public facilities to have access for people with disabilities, however, they don't pay for it. They're mandating, they're requiring that something happens, and the fiscal part, they're not providing the money to do it. The states have to comply with the federal government's mandate requirement, and the states have to then fund it.
And so another example of those you'll see on your note card list is the Clean Air Act is also a federal mandate, along with the motor voter law that I would definitely look at before next Wednesday, but I'm not the one taking the exam. All right, so we're going to wrap up here, all right, with the cartoon again. So we would like you to come to class and ask your teachers, or maybe tell your teachers your interpretation of this cartoon as far as block grants and Medicaid. Remember, we mentioned Medicaid as an example of a categorical grant. And hopefully you know who that Mr. Ryan is. He's kind of an important figure in government. So let's see what we can gather in class on that, because we are all new kids on the block who are experts now on not only categorical grants, but block grants as well. All right, and continue to be hanging tough here with the Kuhn Academy, where we are building responsible voters one video at a time.